you've spent thousands of dollars acquiring these customers. In the physical world, you created an environment for them to walk through your aisles after a return and find a way to pick something else up. If they spend $100 with you and returned $100, you're hoping you get at least 50 out of them because they buy something else. How do you recreate that experience online to be able to drive the same behavior? In the online world, when you buy a pair of shoes and you return it, for example, it takes 7 to 21 days to put your money back on the card. They have to ship that product back to the warehouse. They have to open it up and they have to say, hey, is this the same pair of shoes that Raj bought? Or is he returning a brick? Now, once they vet that and they validate it, then it becomes easy for them to put the money back, which takes a day.
It's interesting when you have something that's been bugging you this whole time and you haven't been able to put your finger on it. It's one of those scary things. I'm getting the hairs on the back of my neck standing up right now just thinking about it in the context of the medical field, right? You didn't know something was up, and then all of a sudden you go to the doctor and it's been going on for a while. And now you have to kind of regroup, reassess, and do something somewhat drastic. I think we're seeing that in returns, especially in the conversations that are happening in e-commerce around returns over the last few months, where lo and behold, for years, this has been a drastic, uh, impact on us. It's been absolutely mauling us from a dollars and cents perspective, but we didn't have the insight or clarity into where that bleed was coming from. So to me, it's one of those unknown unknowns that is quickly becoming known. How we address that and how we move forward, people are still picking up the pieces on. So, Raj, I'm wondering if that jives with you, and if you can run on that, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I've been in retail and e-com for almost 25 years now, and I get I'd call it the incredible luxury of meeting a lot of executives, a lot of people in e-com, especially chief digital officers, people in the return space. And if you think about the 10,000-foot view of what's happening right now, people set up e-com and retail in the digital world to effectively drive more sales, but give people the same sort of luxuries and comforts that they had when they shopped in store, right? And one of them was the experience where you could touch, you could go feel things, you could actually deliver this feeling in your mind that if I buy this, I can absolutely be sure that what I bought is something that I like. But what happened when e-com started to grow is that experience had to be replicated. And when they replicated it, returns was the easiest thing to sort of put in play to say, I can order two pairs of things, or I can order, what I want and sort of put it back on the plate to return it to the store. In the process, returns have increased, I think, 880, 900 billion in the US alone on an annual basis, which is a significant number. And for the most part, I'd say retailers, when you spend time with them, think of it as a cost of business. It's just sort of, this is how I have to run my business, and returns is a part of it. So, what happens in this situation is that people have just accepted the norm. And as you rightly said, when they think about the pain, they assume that there's nothing wrong. That's just what's happening. And then they find this infestation of a problem and they don't know what to do about it. And I think that's fundamentally a big part of the problem, which then dives into a lot more things that people have to ask in their business to solve for it.
Raj, real quick there, you said a lot that was super interesting, but I think the one thing that got my mind really spinning, returns were seen as a way to kind of bridge the gap between this invisible world of e-commerce and that warm and fuzzy feeling of being in the store, smelling the perfume, feeling the cashmere. I don't know. I'm not a cashmere guy, but um, this might be a little outside of the realm, but I'm just wondering, how do you marry that in-store feeling, that personalization feeling, while also going after the pain point, remedying this bleed that is returns? Is it possible, or do I just have to say, well, I'm out of luck now. This one thing that I was doing doesn't work anymore. So dang, I'm done.
If you're sitting in a retailer's shoes, effectively, what are you thinking about? You're thinking about margin is really low in the business. How do I maximize my ability to drive the highest margin? And if a business, and varies, right? Like a fashion retailer is probably sitting at 30% of everything bought online is returned, and somebody in electronics is probably sitting at 5% of everything bought online is returned. So you have gradations of where they're reviewing the business, but ultimately it's the same thing. Margins are tight. And so when you start thinking about the problem, you really have to narrow it down to what are they trying to move if you ran a digital business. And the first thing that you're trying to move is that you want to reduce the cost of returns. If 880 billion is returned annually in the US, what we've seen and what many, many digital officers talk about is that 50% of that could be avoided. That's a staggering number, right? If half of everything that is bought online could be avoided, you have to ask the questions, what is the reasons these are happening and how can I avoid it? So that's number one. Obviously, all of that is not lost cost, but the restocking fee, the reshipping fee, all of that is cost back to them. And then if the product is soiled or something is wrong with it, he just goes to a dumping ground or is just given away for free. So there's a reduction in cost. That is number one. And number two, if I've spent $1,000 in marketing costs to acquire a particular customer, that customer has come in, bought something, now returned it. I don't want to spend another $1,000 to get that person to rebuy something with me, right? So the question is, how do I get that person who just came in and returned something to buy something again by giving them that really cool experience? And by fundamentally doing these two things, you're effectively saying I lower my costs on the return side, and therefore I increase my margin, increase my profit. And two, I'm able to still get someone to buy maybe 30-40% of the time when they make that return, which is very similar to what happens in the in-store experience. So in the old days, when you went in, bought something, and returned in store, now you walk the aisles and you bought something else. But when you do it online, you initiate that return and you go drop off a box maybe 2 weeks later or a week later because you can't get to it. You don't remember about buying something again because you don't have that same experience. And so I think if you sort of step back and just think about what that digital officer is doing, or the head of returns, or whoever else is thinking about this end to end, because a large portion of this problem is it's siloed. They're effectively thinking of those two things. How do I reduce my costs, avoid the return in the first place? And two, when I get that return, how do I make sure I don't have to re-spend customer acquisition costs to get someone to buy again?
Absolutely. And if I'm entering into that world, if I'm hearing this now and I'm like picking my jaw off the ground a little bit and saying, yes, yes, you're right. Absolutely. I think if I put myself in the shoes of these individuals, I'd want to start spotting more, a little bit more granularly. Okay, there's that restock. There's that reship. There's that kind of lost acquisition. How do I do that? I mean, I could just cut out returns entirely, but that's baby in the bathwater kind of move. How do I do that? Can I do that? Do I have to wait 10 years for the jetpacks to come around and like technology to shift again? Is that possible?
To answer that question, you have to start with some examples, because I think fundamentally what happens in this noise of returns, this is a noisy market, right? Like there's a lot of people talking about a lot of things. There are lots of retailers talking about this needs to be solved. But to be able to solve something, you have to frame what you're trying to solve. And so if you take the two pain points effectively, one is how do I avoid the return? And the second pain point as how do I get someone who's returning to spend again? Let's break it down. On the how do I avoid a return? You have to think about what are the use cases that exist in that return. So there's some that are very old school things that you can't get rid of in an easy way. So take, for example, I don't know how the shoe is going to fit. So I'm going to order 3 different kinds of shoes and I'm going to try them all on. I'm going to return 2 and keep 1. If I'm a retailer, I like that because I think that's a good buyer. I still get the sale and I get my two shoes back, which aren't soiled. I can sell them. That's a good use case. You think about the other use case where you want to be able to experience something new that you have never seen before. You buy it. Take an example of glasses and glasses frames. You get a few of them. You want to be able to try them. You do it. That's a great example of a use case where you actually could use that because it gives you that physical store experience. But think about the use cases that don't fit that. I'll give you an example. Like, let's say somebody is running a promotion, so the marketing person in the company comes in and says, if you buy $200 worth of product, I'll give you a 25% discount. Now, there's a really good reason why they're doing that, because they have to hit a growth number, they have to hit a sales number, they have to hit a revenue number. They probably are pushing a new product line that they want people to buy. And so they run a promotion. But think of the consumer on the other side. They're looking at that $200 that you need to buy, and they're saying, if I buy $200 worth of product, I get a 25% discount. So now they buy $200 worth of product. Let's say they buy 3 pairs of jeans. They get that $50 discount, and then they keep one and they return the other 2. Is that something you want as a business? Right. And the question is, no, you don't want that, because now you spent the shipping fee, you sent it back. If you could know that the person was just doing that to get the 25% discount, would you want that transaction to happen? And that's sort of an example of the types of things you're seeing. And there's a lot more. Like, you take the example of, you get a new supplier for a product. Let's say that person has come up with a new material, like a cashmere. You talked about that in the beginning. Well, you get that and you say, well, the size of this thing is a medium or a large, but the material is different. When it was a cotton shirt, it was the right fit for us for a medium large. But when I put in cashmere, I needed to go one size smaller because it stretched a bit more. But now I got that return because the new supplier doesn't know how to match their numbers to what the traditional small, medium, large is. And I think these are problems that you can avoid because you put that in your supply chain and you said, well, size this right. But you don't know that until you start seeing 20% of everything bought is being returned, but 80% of it is coming from this new thing that you've introduced in the market. And so these are examples of things that, as retailers and sort of chief digital officers have started looking at, they're saying, can I avoid these particular things?
I think you were very kind there with going for the materials, because one of the use cases would be someone like me who's been going a little too hard on the Oreo cookies lately, and I might still want to believe that I'm a 33-inch waist, and then I'll say, "Well, dang it, your 33 just isn't a real 33." And there's that one. But it seems like for years, or even right now, all of these points are far flung all across different systems and different people and different ways of thinking, different dashboards. How do we bring it all together? Can you bring it all together? Is that another thing that we have to wait for the jetpacks with?
Yeah. And this is a good natural sort of dialogue of you going from framing the problem. And I'll get into the second part of the problem too, which is more about how do you get someone to buy more, because we didn't sort of close the thread on that. But to go back to the first one and just sort of close the loop for your question, so as you think about what will allow you to be able to make the call of when someone's making a purchase, if they're buying with the right intent versus not buying with the right intent. And the right intent is sort of fuzzy, right? Like, your business may be thinking about intent very differently from my business, but ultimately you want to be able to tailor your answer to your business policies and your thinking of what's right. But where the problem continues to exacerbate, and I'll get to sort of how do you put this together, is that there's 2 things. Number one is there's no clear owner to the problem of returns. It is highly fragmented within the enterprise. So if you look at it today, there's somebody in fulfillment that owns a piece of it. There's someone in marketing that owns a piece of it. There's someone who has growth in their title who's got something to do with it. You've got customer success that has a piece to do there. You've got, inventory management who's dealing with it. There's just a lot of different people, including the stores, the physical stores, have a lot of different roles and responsibilities with no clear lines of ownership. And so when people sort of throw out the number of 880 billion being returned, no one actually owns that, you know? So it starts with that. And then the second one is, even if somebody owned it, the biggest challenge is the second one, which is the fragmentation of data. To be able to even have visibility into what is a good return, what is versus an abusive return versus an avoidable return, there's no insight, 360-degree insight into all of these different pieces. And what is required? You need to know everything from the customer journey at the point of when they landed on your site. You have to look at their history of purchases. You've got to look at the network of their purchases over time. You've got to figure out, what they're returning, when are they returning. You've got to know the supply chain. You've got to look at the reviews of what people are giving in their systems. It's just this amalgamation of distributed data and a lack of a clear owner. And so you don't have to wait for the jetpacks in many ways. I think there are tools that are starting to come to fore. Like if you look at what Signifyd has done over the years in risk management, looking at fraud at checkout, it's the exact same problem. When we took it over back 10 plus years ago, it was a fragmentation of data across various silos with no clear owner of who was actually championing the conversion. Everybody, there was a champion for the fraud. There's always a champion for the returns, but it's really the upside of it, which is, okay, if I treat this customer well and I do it well, how much money are you leaving on the table? There was never a champion. And so if we've taken a similar model, which is, how do you take this fragmented data, stitch it all together, and bring a 360-degree view to the retailer to say, here's what your return portfolio and profile looks like. Here's what the goods are. Here's what the bads are. These are avoidable ones. And if you do these things, let me tell you, these 10 things, which are the top priorities, you can reduce your returns by 20, 30, 40%. And these are the avoidable returns. You actually want returns to be there. You don't want to completely abandon it because there are good people who use it for certain use cases that you want to continue to encourage.
Let's get a little future forward then. I mean, what does it look like, out there in the coming days, weeks, months, and years when you've got a healthy business that is handling this problem in a healthy way and is still able to entice buyers into doing something different, trying something new, buying more through returns?
Everything that people talk about, and I think is super valuable, is the avoidable piece. And it's still hard. No one has solved it. It's going to take a while. I think companies have to still anoint their czar of who's going to be owning it. And I think the chief digital officers need to own that with teams who can execute against it. But the big piece, and honestly, the big opportunity here, is you've spent thousands of dollars acquiring these customers. In the physical world, you created an environment for them to walk through your aisles after a return and find a way to pick something else up. So if they spend $100 with you and returned $100, you're hoping you get at least 50 out of them because they buy something else. How do you recreate that experience online to be able to drive the same behavior? And one of the biggest things that happens in the online world is when you buy a pair of shoes and you return it, for example, it takes 7 to 21 days to put your money back on the card. Not because the payment rails don't exist to put the money back. It's because they have to ship that product back to the warehouse. They have to open it up and they have to say, hey, is this the same pair of shoes that Raj bought? Or is he returning a brick? Or is he returning an old pair of shoes of some sort? Now, once they vet that and they validate it, then it becomes easy for them to put the money back, which takes a day. That isn't the long pole in the tent. And so the opportunity here, outside of many other things, but this is one of the opportunities, is to actually say, if I think Raj is good when he's making that return happen, why not put the money back instantly for him? And if I did that, what we've seen in the market today is that more than 40% of the time, somebody buys instantly again. So if you spent that $1,000 to acquire Raj to buy a $250 pair of shoes, and you've lost that $250 because Raj returned it and so forth, your chances are 40% chance that Raj will buy something again if you put the money back instantly. Not because Raj can't afford it. There's two groups of society, right? There's one group of society who doesn't have a lot of credit and they want the money back so they can buy something instantly. And there's another group of society which is basically they have cash to buy again, but they're not going to make that happen because they have to ship something back. And this is not top of mind. But if you gave them the incentive at the point of sale, at the point of return, they buy something again. And that conversion opportunity is actually as big as reducing the opportunity of the cost side of it. And I think that is going to be the other part of it, which is very hard. It's not an easy problem when you think about it. It sort of goes back to the fraud problem at checkout. But how do I know Raj is good? How do I know Raj is going to return that pair of shoes? You put the money back instantly, but if he ships something else, I'm now out the product, I'm out the money. It takes intelligence to be able to sift through a million data points and looking at all the transactions to say Raj is going to make that happen. And to back that up with this idea that you can guarantee it, I think changes the game for retailers.
Raj, I've known you for a little while now, and you seem like you're having fun with this problem. What is it that gets you kind of jazzed up around returns? I just personally, outside of I'm just curious about that because I do see you, you look like it's the ninth inning and you wanna, shut it down and you wanna strike out the side. So just on a personal level, I would love to hear about that.
Oh, it's a great question. I think, what I am always excited about and motivated by is just the feeling of solving real problems for real people out in the world. And you can solve a lot of different problems, obviously, as you sort of expand, but we have spent our lives with people in the world of retail, commerce, payments. And as I look at the horizon here, fraud and checkout, we've made a huge dent in that universe. If you look back at the period of time, chargebacks used to sit at 60 to 80 basis points. We're down to like in the low single digits, high single digits in some cases. Auth rates and approval rates were in the 80s. We've now pushed it up into the upper 90s in the world. And so it was a challenging problem. When you look back at time, balancing that approval rate versus loss rate and making sure you're always delivering for that customer was a hard problem. But with the great team and great people and sort of tackling this problem over 10 years, we've made a huge dent in that problem. And as you start looking at adjacent things and you start seeing what else is out there that people are dealing with in our sphere of influence, returns is the next, like not even the next big thing. It already is the biggest thing out there. It is bigger than fraud. 880 million, somewhere between 5% to 30% of people's products bought online are returned. If you look at it from that magnitude and scale, this is a much bigger problem to go off and solve. Can it all be solved? Is all returns going to go to zero? Absolutely not. There's always going to be returns. There's genuinely good use cases for it. But if you look at the data, more than 40 to 50% of everything being returned can either be avoided because of fraud or abuse or for just gamification. And the other part of it, you can get them to buy 40% of the time if they're returning, just drives a massive amount of growth for retailers, plus cuts down massively when you think of the OpEx and sort of cost and margin that these guys have to be able to run their business. And so that, going back to the theme of solving big problems that we can look at over the next decade, this is a big one. And so that's what keeps me motivated and excited about it.
I love it. It's palpable. It's giving me what I need today. It's doing my heart good. I guess parting words here of motivation from you, inspiration, and maybe a little bit of guidance if I'm sitting in the seat of somebody who wants to tackle this problem. What's my first step?
I'd say I break it down into the following. The first step is to recognize that you need to put some structure on who owns the problem. I think it's a very challenging piece to assume that shared ownership is going to lead to execution and outcomes that you want. So I think it's first alignment on that. But the next thing that I would get into is getting an understanding of a 360-degree view of what's happening in your world of returns within your business. So this would mean stitching together that data finding a way to be able to piece together what that means for you and what the returns problem, if at all, looks like within your business. And then the third piece is, after you've got that insight, starting to chip away one piece at a time of saying, how do I avoid this return from happening if it shouldn't? And two, how do I start using that to convert good customers by giving them some form of an instant refund so they can drive towards buying again and not having to acquire that customer through more acquisition costs? And so if you follow those steps, I sort of believe that you can get to the place where you can have a very healthy business that solves for both of these particular problems over time.
As Pink Floyd once said, time, there isn't enough of it, Raj. And I just thank you for your time. And this is a conversation that can go on for a much longer time. So I really appreciate talking with you today and look forward to catching up again when you're on to the next big one.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate the time.